Hi everyone, thank you very much for coming today. As I said, I'm Cara Warburton. I was the KTP Associate on this project, so I ran the majority of the project based here at TTC. I'm going to go through the sort of background to the project right up until, and all the different components right up until the results, and then I'm going to hand over to Robin. Robin's going to go through the results of the research with you. The overall aim of the KTP project was to develop a rigorous process for assessing the personal benefits of attending a speed awareness course. Essentially, it was just, that means we wanted to assess the courses and see if there was any impact on people's intention to change their driving behaviour, drive within the speed limit, before they attended the course and after they attended the course. And as I said, it was an 18-month project that ran from November 2010 to April 2012. And in terms of a KTP, this is a knowledge transfer partnership. And the way that this works is you have a host company, in this case was TTC, and you have a knowledge base, which in this case was Aston University, and an associate who runs the project. And it's a way of bringing together the skills and knowledge of two organisations to try and usually conduct a piece of research in a variety of different areas. In this case, it was about speed awareness courses. So I worked closely both with TTC and with Aston University to make sure that TTC obviously provided the base for me to work at, and also the knowledge of the area that we were researching, and also the sample, large amount of funding and that sort of thing. And Aston provided the knowledge base, so the knowledge of the research practice, and I sort of tried to bring it together. So the key areas of the KTP project, I'm just going to go through the titles. They probably won't make much sense at the moment, but I will obviously go over them in more detail. Firstly is the speed awareness course of client evaluations, as background research, the mini project, refusals project, and then the main research project. So one of my first roles when I started at TTC was looking at the client's post-course evaluations, so the evaluations that clients filled in after they'd attended the courses. When I started, this was just a single sheet of A4 handed to clients at the end of the course, and they were asked to fill it in then and hand it back to the trainer. And this obviously got 100% response rate, but the information wasn't actually utilised in any way because, there's a few reasons. The questions weren't particularly in depth. They were handed straight back to the trainer, so obviously a lot of the time clients want to comment about the trainer, and it's a bit awkward if you're writing something about someone and then having to hand them a piece of paper. And also there was a few other things to do with formatting and reporting that just needed a bit of tweaking. So I redeveloped the questions, and also it was put on in an online format, and clients, instead of being given the questionnaires as soon as they left the course, were sent an email link about a week after they've attended, so it gives them a bit of a chance to actually digest what they've learned on the course and have a real think about what were the good parts and what were the bad parts, if there were any bad parts or any good parts. And there was also a new reporting mechanism which allowed for a lot more useful information to be extracted from clients and used within the organisation, within TTC, to help improve the services, so improve trainer conduct, improve the venues, and also to look at the areas of the course overall to see which bits were actually more successful in the overall aim of changing people's attitude and behaviour towards speeding. So this is used for continuous improvement. And that's the area that I've continued with, and I continue to go over all of the evaluations every month that the client sends in, which can sometimes be quite a hefty task, because the questions now all have open-ended responses, so you can get up to sort of 30,000 comments a month to go through, and obviously a lot of them are very nice but not particularly useful, but then I go through and work out what ones I think need to be passed on to the management and need to be dealt with, and I produce a report. There's two areas. This is the statistical data, which is just looking at you know, people rating the sections of the course, the trainers and the venues and all that sort of thing. There's also some demographic questions, which is something that hasn't really, isn't really noted very much in terms of at any point there's no demographic questions asked of clients, so you don't really know the demographics of the clients that are coming through, and obviously it'd be better to do it beforehand, but in this case we're trying to capture that information afterwards. And then the comments are all split into sections, so there's all the positive comments that can be, which obviously if it's about a trainer, it's always really nice for the trainers to be able to hear the impact that they have on the clients, because one thing I've really noticed with doing the post-course evaluations is the massive impact that the trainers can have in whether people have a good experience or a bad experience with their courses, and also how much they take away from their courses. There's so many times where you read a comment where people say, I really didn't want to go, I really wasn't looking forward to it. I didn't think, I only went so that I wouldn't get the points. But the trainer completely changed my attitude, and I really took loads away from the course, and you get to read that so much. It's really nice to get that feedback from clients. And then also there's some more constructive comments that need to be passed on for various reasons. Okay, now the background research. The first couple of months I was sort of learning about the organisation and how the whole processes worked. I was also looking through the client's records, any comments that were already there, looking at some of the past evaluations, that sort of thing. And I also conducted a literature review, so looking at the areas of research that had already been conducted within this field and where the gaps were, and speed awareness was a huge gap really. There wasn't very much research done since the preliminary introduction research that was being published at the moment. Okay, the mini project was a sort of research project within the research project, and it was an aim to look at the initial contact literature that's sent to clients from the police and from TTC to see if this had any impact, so to see if there was any indication about whether the first contact they had made a difference into whether they wanted to take the points in the fine or whether they were going to take the offer of a course. This was a multi-level research study, and it was just looking at the specific differences between the letters, because there's no sort of standardised process. We wanted to see if that made any difference, whether the process in West Mercia or South Yorkshire would affect clients. I'm just picking out two at random, there were specific, whether they would have any difference in whether a client was more likely or less likely to accept the offer of a course. And also to see if there was any suggestions of how to improve this so that people were inclined to take the offer of a course as soon as they got their NIP and their initial contact literature. So 100 questionnaires were sent out, 45 were returned, which is a really good response rate for this type of research. I also ran a focus group with some marketing students from Warburton University to try and look at the letters from more of a marketing perspective. And the sample, it was really important that they'd never seen that literature before, so there were people who hadn't attended a course or hadn't even been offered a course previously. And there, at the time, there were only 5 forces who had contracts with TTC. This was before Devon, Cornwall, Avon, Somerset and Durham joined on board, so it's the original 5 courses, 5 forces that were that had contracts with TTC when I started. There was some difference between the letters in terms of the response rate. I then compared that to sort of acceptance rates of those forces, and to be honest, there wasn't a massive correlation. So I think the results sort of showed that as 87% of people were likely to accept the offer of a speed awareness course out of this sample, but this was regardless of the initial contact literature. So there were some things that I took out of it, but it showed that actually people who were inclined to take the offer of a course were going to do that regardless of what the first contact was. But there were some differences, so it seemed that younger drivers were more likely to accept the offer of a course. And there were also lots of comments referring to the letters saying that if they were clearer and easier to understand, and preferably with a little bit of information about the course. This would increase people's likelihood to take the course. And what I think most people here would know already is that most people would attend the course to avoid getting penalty points on their licence, which was sort of given with this. Okay, the Refusals project was a really interesting part, excuse me, of this research. And it seemed important when the main project was obviously always going to be really interesting looking at whether there was any change, but it was also important to look, you know, when you're trying to get people to attend the course, it's really important to look at why they're not attending. So what are the main reasons for them to decline the offer of a course, when it seems like you'd think that it would make sense to the majority of people that if they attend that they're not going to get the points, so that would be enough, or just to sort of get a bit of training for quite a reasonable price really, but we wanted to look at why people were not attending the courses. So this was conducted with TTC's clients who accepted the offer to the police and then declined at a later stage. So that they'd accepted the offer with the police and then gone on to decline to TTC. It was to get an understanding of why people were refusing the offer of the course, and also to assist in developing the questionnaires for the main project. With this, it was really providing evidence of the main barriers, because obviously if you can find the barriers, and you're going to be able to find ways of overcoming these barriers and get more people onto the courses. Firstly, I looked at TTC archives, because there was some records made about why when people gave reasons for rejecting the course, but quite a lot of people didn't. So I had a look through and tried to sort of categorise what the main reasons were, so we weren't sort of wildly like groping around in the dark to see, well, people have given these reasons, so these would make sense to ask more about whether this is a general sort of thing. Like a lot of people gave reasons such as not being able to get time off work, so obviously you want to be asking if that's something that a lot of people are finding. So 500 questionnaires were sent out to clients, and they were also offered an incentive of £5 donation to the NSPCC to try and increase the acceptance rate, the response rate. The questionnaire contained 29 what we refer to as factors, so things like childcare, work commitments, cost, that sort of thing. Massive list basically of any of these factors, plus some statements which we refer to as enhancers. So there were statements about reasons for people to give for attending a course to see if they were, obviously you'd be looking at whether they're reversed. So these are sorts of reasons that people give for attending the course, whether they scored really low on that, and also resistors. So you're looking for basically someone who would attend a course. You'd be looking for them to score highly on the enhancers and low on the resistors, and obviously refuse the course, you're looking at it the other way around. And they were mainly to do with attitude and behaviour rather than sort of practical barriers. Okay, so out of the 500 questionnaires that were sent out, 106 were returned, which is a really good response rate considering these were people who weren't very positively inclined to attend the course. The demographics were pretty evenly spread, so it's a representative sample. So once all the responses were returned, we did what was called factor analysis. So we grouped together specific factors to see that have sort of that were linked together, and these split into practical barriers. These are things like work commitments, childcare issues, having to travel too far to the course, that sort of thing. So anything that was like that wasn't to do with their attitude, was to do with actually being able to get to the course in the first place. Enhancers, so these are things like not getting penalty points on the licence, being able to sort of reduce the likelihood that they would speed in the future. Attitude, so these would be barriers to attending, so things like thinking they weren't going to learn anything new, thinking that the course was a waste of time, thinking that the police were just doing this to make money, those sorts of things. And these were the main sort of groupings. So there were people, you often find that people who said one practical barrier would say a few, so they'd say, I had work commitments and I haven't got enough time and the venue's too far away and there's not enough courses. And someone with an attitude, who has a negative attitude towards the course would say, oh, well, I'm not going to learn anything new, it's a complete waste of time, and I don't need to go on a course because I didn't really do anything wrong. The only significant difference with the respondents was that more female respondents were more likely to have enhancers, so they were more likely to say, well, I would have wanted to go to the course, but I couldn't get the childcare, I couldn't get the time off work, or it would cost too much. Whereas much more men were more likely to have attitudinal barriers, so they were much more likely to say that they didn't think they were going to learn anything new and they thought it was a waste of time. But overall, the main barriers were financial. So the main barriers were that people thought the cost of the course was too expensive and that they didn't want to pay more than the cost of the fine for the course. That was the main, out of all of the factors, that was the main factor, was that people didn't want to pay more for the course than they did for the fine. Because there was also comments such as, well, it's not just that I had to pay more, I had to take half a day or a day off work, so they sort of contribute it and it pushes up the cost, had to get there and all that sort of thing. So that was the main one, and work commitments was closely followed by that. So this led on to some suggestions that I made to TTC. The first was pretty clear, was that having courses outside typical office hours would push up response rates, so evening and weekend courses, which have now been introduced in a lot of areas. Possibilities to lobby for the fines be increased, because at £60 it is quite low. It's one of the few fines that hasn't actually been increased in, I think, the last 20 years, to my knowledge. So that would push up that would push up acceptance rates. Also monitor the rejections in-house, so looking at trying to identify patterns, such as if there's an area where, say in South Yorkshire, if lots of people are saying that we want a venue in Sheffield, then you obviously would show that putting a venue in Sheffield will increase response rates. And also just assessing the communications with clients, because there were some responses, the majority were practical barriers, but there were some people who were worried about things like worried about there being a test on the course. So that's something that can be quite easily dealt with. If that's the reason they're not going, because they're worried they're going to fail a test, then that's something that can be looked at in communications with clients. And also more publicity of the use of the funds from the course, because again, another thing was that people thought that the police were just using this as an excuse to make money that was going into sort of the central pot. So actually publicising the fact that it goes back into road safety might have an impact on some more negative clients. And also it showed that further research would be good in this area, as well as the evening and weekend courses being put on. I then conducted a really little piece of research with female clients to see if there would be an interest in female-only courses, to see if that would have any impact. And actually the thing that came out of that the most was that that not just women, but more likely to be women, had issues with the times of the courses, not because of childcare issues if they had preschool children, but having school-age children, because it's actually they were finding it a lot easier to have someone to look after their child for the whole day than pick them up or drop them off at school. And obviously 9 o'clock and 6 o'clock sort of start and finish made it really difficult for that. So there are actually courses being run now from 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock, which is perfect for if they can take a day off work, they can get the kids to school and they can pick them up and they can attend the course. and further research into refusals. I mean, the really interesting sample would be looking at people who've refused the offer directly to the police, but there are issues around data protection, and that would obviously more likely to need to be done in-house by the police. Okay, so the main project was a longitudinal study with TTC clients who attended and completed a speed awareness course. They were given 3 questionnaires. The first was prior to attending, so about a week before they attended the course. The second was 1 to 2 weeks after they attended the course. And the third was over a month after attending the course. And the aim of this was to measure their intention to stay within the speed limit before and after the course, and whether this had changed before and after the course. In terms of development, the theoretical basis for this piece of research was the theory of planned behaviour, which Robin will talk about in more detail, but essentially it suggests that you can predict a person's intention to perform a particular behaviour. If you can predict their intention, you can predict how likely it is that they will perform that behaviour. In this case, that will obviously be speeding. So if you can look at their intention prior to attending and look at their intention after attending the course, then you can see whether there's been any change or whether they are more likely to try and stick within the speed limit after they've attended the course, which is obviously what you're looking for. So the development utilised brought together everything that I'd done up until that point with all the different pieces of research and led to the questionnaire development. It was then a case of more practical things, so identifying a sample and getting the questionnaires out to clients, and obviously getting enough clients to be able to agree to complete the questionnaires. And we started out with just 2 sample groups that were sort of around a week apart in when they were attending, and it was from all police forces. There was a sample from each police force that has contracts with TTC. We then also, to try and get more valid data, we added in some additional sample groups. So there was the first 2 sample groups were sent all 3 questionnaires. So they were sent all 3 questionnaires, and then. So they were sent the first questionnaire a week before. If they sent back the first questionnaire, then they were sent the second questionnaire around 2 weeks after they attended the course. And then if they sent back the second questionnaire, they were sent back the third questionnaire at least over a month after they attended. We then also tried to, the main difference you're looking at is pre and post course. So we had a sample of people who just completed the first questionnaire. We then sent them, but hadn't completed the second. So they completed the first, got sent the second, but hadn't completed it. We then gave them another opportunity to complete the third questionnaire. So we sent them a copy of the third questionnaire, and a few people got back to us with that. And then we also sent 2 other groups a sample of the third questionnaire. The first one was people who hadn't responded at all to the first questionnaire, but were on that sample list. And the second was a completely new sample group who took the course around the same time as the first sample group, as the original sample groups, to see if this was, so that we could look at the results from that and see if they were very similar, then you could say that it's not just down to the fact that they'd completed the same questionnaire 3 times, it was actually down to the course, that the results were in the same sort of region. And that's where I'm going to stop, and Robin is going to talk through the results. Is there any questions?